Coming up, the sinister turn in American politics.
I took a bullet to the head.
Why was Donald Trump targeted twice?
It's a tidal wave.
And why was the Secret Service caught napping?
The bottom line is they had the information.
Yeah.
That's next on 60 Minutes. Donald Trump is used to, figuratively, being in the sights of his detractors. What he's not used to is when it happens for real. Unbelievably, in the last 2.5 months, 2 people have taken aim at Donald Trump with weapons. In July, the former and want-to-be next president was grazed by a bullet at a campaign rally in Pennsylvania. And then 2 weeks ago, he was targeted again while playing golf in Florida. Fortunately, both assassination attempts failed. But what the attacks have done is not only highlight security failures in the protection of America's leaders, they've sent this year's presidential campaign into meltdown.
He's got a gun!
What you're seeing is a tragedy that should never have happened. A monumental failure by US authorities. These defiant images of former President Donald Trump dodging a bullet at a campaign rally are iconic.
He's straight up! Yo, Chance, you got me up once, bro.
Shooter, did he have a weapon? Is he?
But even more disturbing is the frantic vision captured on body cameras worn by local police.
They kind of when you lose a guy walking back here. They were
Tonight, witnesses reveal what authorities missed at the Butler rally.
He's on the roof, buddy.
He'd actually picked his gun up and swung it over, and he was aiming towards us right before the Secret Service shot him.
As we investigate how a young gunman could get so close to a former president and the ominous consequences for the campaign.
To me, it's inconceivable. The shooter has now shown the world how easy it is to do this.
He's turning this way. Be careful.
You only have to walk down Main Street, lined with American flags, to get a sense of how peaceful and proud the town is, or was, until July 13 this year, when Butler became famous for something else altogether.
It's really weird being back here. So we were right over there, kind of where those stacks are.
Local John Malice was looking forward to attending Donald Trump's campaign rally with wife Kathy and their 2 daughters, despite the searing July heat.
We got in line with everybody else. There was probably about 20,000 people ahead of us in line. The temperature was just north of 95 degrees and really, really humid. And with all the people, it was getting pretty bad. They were taking people out on stretchers. So we decided to leave the actual rally area, and we drove around looking for another vantage point that maybe we could at least hear the rally. And then we came across the AGR building, and we could see to the back, and we saw the fence line, and we could actually see the stage.
The AGR, or American Glass Research Building, belongs to a packaging company. It stands beside the Butler Farm showgrounds, where the former president addressed the crowd. So I'm standing almost exactly where Donald Trump was delivering his remarks, and we know that on these buildings just here, Secret Service snipers were positioned, but incredibly, just a stone's throw away, the gunman was able to climb up and open fire. It is so close, it's just unbelievable when you're standing here that rooftop could be left unpatrolled.
The lack of patrol was scary to our guys.
Detective Pat Young is chief of the SWAT team in neighbouring Beaver County.
How often would you deal with a live shooter situation?
We run probably about 30 or 40 high-risk incidents a year.
His team of around 10 tactical officers were supporting and taking orders from the Butler local police on rally day. In the weeks and the days leading up to the Butler rally, what communications did you have with federal agencies?
We really didn't have any. We were working for Butler County. So in this case, they provided all the information directly from Secret Service. It went from Secret Service to Butler, and then all those assignments were given to us from them.
So on July 13, what were your instructions?
Our team was tasked basically with two major taskings. One was to be in the south of the secured area, and they were assigned several specific areas within the secured area to respond to if there was an active shooter or something. Then our second component was tasked with a sniper overwatch. And they were advised that they were supposed to be posted in the AJR building. And they were tasked with overwatching the crowd.
But what they couldn't see from inside the AGR building was what or who was on the roof. It was to be a fatal mistake. At 5:04 p.m, just under an hour before the former president was due to appear, John Mallis's dash cam recorded the shooter, Thomas Crooks, approaching the AGR building. A member of Detective Young's team, an extremely experienced sniper by the name of Greg Nickel, also spotted Crooks.
He just seems out of place. He's alone, he's by himself, but really nothing else. No weapon, no anything. And Greg just takes some pictures at the time. At some point later, he sees him again, but he sees him pick up a monocular-looking thing to one eye. And Greg looks through his binoculars and he sees, it positively identifies it as a rangefinder.
And just explain why a rangefinder is such a red flag.
We use rangefinders to determine range to target. You know, they use them on a golf course, right? For us, it establishes what our ballistic solution would be to engage a target.
So that's a pretty unusual thing to pull out at a rally.
It is, it is.
Detective Young's sniper knew something wasn't right. At 5:38 p.m, he texted photos of Crooks up the chain of command and radioed his concerns to Butler Police. The Secret Service was notified, but incredibly failed to act. Despite several sightings and warnings, 25 minutes later, at 6:03 p.m, Donald Trump walked on stage, just 120 metres from where Thomas Crooks had climbed onto the roof, clutching an AR-15 rifle.
You know, things started getting a little weird. People were yelling about somebody being on the roof.
Yeah, look, there he is.
Because we have millions and millions of people in our country.
And then we saw police start to come around the corner.
Criminals. We have criminals. We have people that should not be here.
And one of the police officers drew his sidearm. That's when my wife and I said maybe we should start, you know, looking for an exit. And then as we were walking, we heard somebody say, you know, he's on the roof, he has a gun.
He's got a gun!
A couple seconds later, you could hear the first 3 shots ring out. That's when everybody started running and screaming.
He's straight up!
We have 2 civilians attending to him.
Yo, you about to hop up? He's laying down. He's on our next building over. Right after the gap.
This vision from body cameras worn by Butler local law enforcement and members of Detective Young's SWAT team shows the bedlam and panic.
You guys were on the roof. Why were we not on the roof?
Football from us. We need to go somewhere over in the west side.
Why weren't we?
Because I thought we were supposed to start.
What's most striking about this footage is that no one seemed to know where many of the snipers were located, or if the threat had passed.
He's turning this way. Be careful.
I do too, but we haven't confirmed it. I seen his head fall.
Within a matter of moments, Thomas Crooks was shot dead by snipers. And an innocent spectator, Corey Comparator, was killed in the crossfire. He died shielding his wife and daughters from the bullets. We now know Thomas Crooks scoped the site just hours before the rally, flying his drone over the showground, plotting his attack. The glaring security failures are at the centre of an FBI investigation and fiery congressional hearings.
Okay, you're refusing to answer the question. Let me ask, because the failures on that day were catastrophic.
Coming up, who is ultimately responsible? Do you feel like they relied on you, but then threw you under the bus?
Absolutely.
And why the danger is far from over.
It's a tidal wave. The number of threats against public figures, political figures, across the entire country, it's off the charts.
Driver! Take 2 steps to your right! Take 2 steps to your right!
Just when we thought the US presidential race couldn't get any uglier, only a fortnight ago, there was another attempt on Donald Trump's life. The former president was targeted during a round of golf at his Florida club. A 58-year-old gunman got within 450 metres of Trump before being spotted and arrested by the Secret Service.
The number of threats against public figures, political figures, across the entire country, it's off the charts.
Andrew McCabe spent more than 2 decades with the FBI, first as a SWAT team member, before working his way up to acting director. He warns the close call in Florida, but more significantly, in Butler, Pennsylvania, just 10 weeks ago, has highlighted potential holes in security around presidential candidates.
I think one of the most disturbing things that comes from this experience is that the shooter has now shown the world how easy it is to do this under the right circumstances. You know, there is perceived vulnerability. Taking advantage of that vulnerability makes a horrific act of political violence entirely possible.
Andrew McCabe has his own checkered history with the former president. In 2017, McCabe opened an investigation into whether President Trump's campaign colluded with Russia during the 2016 election. He was sensationally fired from the FBI. I know there's no love lost between yourself and Donald Trump. I mean, this is a man who accused you of treason.
Yeah, that wasn't good. He is a former president and a candidate for office, and his ability to run a fair and vigorous campaign and to speak both to his supporters and his detractors is absolutely essential to the democratic process in this country.
For the presidential candidates, campaigning in the swing state of Pennsylvania is crucial. Voters here could decide the election. The July 13 event should have been like any other rally. How would you describe what happened in Butler?
When your job is to protect the former president of the United States and you take responsibility for protecting him at that event and someone tries to kill him at that event and almost does, that's a failure. There was a sniper team in this building.
As former deputy director of the FBI, Andrew McCabe knows the extreme measures required to run a safe and successful rally.
For a sniper.
Planning begins well before the day, when the Secret Service send an advance team to scope the site. So this is the rally ground. What would the advance team be looking for?
Well, typically at the beginning of the advance, they would look at a map like this, and they would determine an area to freeze for some period of time before the event. Like they would maybe take this property line and close off all access to it by vehicles and people, and then they'd hold on to that until the day of the event, and they'd let people in a very controlled manner.
And how would they decide where to put their snipers?
Well, it's a great question. So when we look at this map, the actual security perimeter is not designated here, but we know that it did not include the roof and the buildings from where the shot was actually delivered. So you can imagine it was certainly behind these structures, which would have provided access to the backstage area, and then out here to some range. But it raises that really important question of, when you see the proximity of this roof to the stage where the former president would be unprotected out in the open, how did they make the decision to not include that roof within the secure zone?
It's only roughly 120 metres away from him.
That's right, that's right. And any competent marksman with a rifle, certainly one like the AR-15 we know is used here, it's not hard to make that shot if you have had any sort of training and practice.
The security failure is even more astounding in light of intelligence passed on to the Secret Service in early July. US authorities had reason to believe Iran was planning to assassinate Donald Trump. Was that a credible, well-known threat to your knowledge?
It certainly seems to have been. The FBI has been pretty clear about the fact that they passed that threat information on to the Secret Service, and the service used that information to rethink their security to some extent for this event.
I acknowledge this was a failure of the
Is it
Secret
not
Service.
prima facie that somebody has failed? A former president was shot.
Politically, the aftermath of the attempt on Donald Trump's life has been messy and so far inconclusive, playing out in heated congressional hearings.
So, Senator, one, I've been very transparent and forthcoming.
Your agency has not been transparent and forthcoming, so please, let's not go there.
Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheadle resigned 10 days after the shooting, shifting the pressure to Acting Director Ronald Rowe, who initially blamed local law enforcement for failing to secure the rooftop where Thomas Crooks almost got away with murder.
Fired from. I could not, and I will not, and I cannot understand why there was not better coverage, or at least somebody looking at that roof line when that's where they were posted.
I was really angry, to tell you the truth.
Detective Pat Young leads the Beaver County SWAT team who was on duty that day. One of his snipers was the first to spot the gunman and send a warning to the Secret Service. So he was furious when the agency's boss told Congress his team didn't do their jobs properly.
Their perspective from the AGR building, looking out, their area of responsibility, looking left, they should have been able to see. If they'd have just held their post and looked left.
What was going through your mind when you heard that?
It was completely wrong. You know, our guys, they don't do this SWAT job for the money. They do it for the love of the job and for the love of people. And to have their reputation soiled in front of Congress was beyond hurtful.
Do you feel like they relied on you, but then threw you under the bus?
Absolutely. We're working for Secret Service. And, you know, whatever plans that they had that we were a part of, we carried out those plans.
But the bottom line is they had the information and they didn't act on it.
Yeah.
Amid the anger and finger-pointing over who is to blame, the Trump camp has tried to capitalise on the violence.
I probably took a bullet to the head
because of the things that they say about me.
I can't help but wonder, why didn't law enforcement officials arrest the shooter before the speech? There is definitely more to this story.
Take a look at what happened.
Last week, the Secret Service acknowledged it failed to give clear and crucial directions to local law enforcement partners. And while the FBI investigation continues, the campaign trail looks vastly different. Donald Trump is now surrounded by almost as many Secret Service agents as the current president, and bulletproof glass is being installed for outdoor events, an unprecedented security measure.
Gosh, it says a lot about the moment, doesn't it?
It really does. We are operating in an incredibly dangerous time. The polarization and the emotions around this election are at a peak. And let's not forget, we're a country in which pretty much anyone can get their hands on a very powerful military-grade weapon anytime they want. That makes this a powder keg.
Hello, I'm Amelia Adams. Thanks for watching 60 Minutes Australia. Subscribe to our channel now for brand new stories and exclusive clips every week. And don't miss out on our extra minute segments and full episodes of 60 Minutes on 9now.com.au and the 9Now app.